Welcome back for another video. In this week's video we're going to be looking at hand stitching. I want to show you a couple of different stitches that really secure something in place. So we're going to be looking at herringbone stitching, which allows something like a hem or some extra seam allowance in something that's unlined to sit nice and flat. The other stitch is a locking stitch, which does exactly what it sounds like. It locks something into place because every single stitch is locked into place. And the last one is a stitch which allows you to secure a fastening really well into one position, and that's a buttonhole stitch. As a costume maker for longer than I want to admit online, I've made a variety of different costumes, and these are some of the stitches that I always go to. I love a herringbone stitch because it looks nice and neat. When you look inside a costume, it has that effect of looking really pleasant and neat and finished, but it also really secures something into place. The locking stitch is somewhat invisible, so you don't see it, but it's a very, very secure stitch. So if you've got a really thick denim hard-wearing fabric that you need to secure into place at the hem, then that's an excellent one to use. Or a leather, for example, that's another fabric that this stitch is really good for. And the buttonhole stitch is excellent at securing any fastening into place, especially something like a popper, or in America they call them snap fastenings. It's a really good way of ensuring that a fastening lasts not just one performance, but runs and runs and runs of performances. In costume, we don't just machine stitch everything, we do a lot of hand stitching. It's a bit like a hybrid between modern day dressmaking processes that you use in the fashion industry, where everything is machine stitched, and traditional historical techniques, tried and tested processes that were all done by hand but can't translate to secure machine stitching. Herringbone, for example, is an excellent stitch which you can't really compare to a machine stitch, possibly a blind hem, but I always find that a herringbone is much nicer. It produces a flatter result. We're going to start with a good stitch for hemming and keeping anything back and in place. So using a herringbone stitch allows you to cross over the top of your hem, or the piece that you want to hold back, and secure it in place, but also give it a little bit of give, allowing it to move just enough so nothing is tight and restricted. This is an unconventional material to use. I'm just using this so I can show you the stitch itself, and I thought this fabric and this thread will stand out quite nicely. You can actually see what I'm doing. So I wouldn't recommend using a stiff felt, depending on the project that you're creating, but if you're hemming up a pair of trousers, for example, this fabric will be a lot smoother. So I'm just going to do a little stitch down here to hold my thread in place, and I like to do a couple of over stitches. I will say that I'm not a knotter of thread, mainly for me because I feel that it knots the thread even further, but I do a couple of overcasts at the beginning, and I find that's more than enough. To do a herringbone stitch, you actually have to stitch the opposite way to the way you normally would. So if I was stitching something, normally I would be stitching from right to left. To do a herringbone stitch, I have to go the opposite way, so I'd have to be stitching from left to right, and that is because of the direction your needle needs to be in order for the crosses to form, and I'll show you that now. So I've got my anchoring stitch. I'm going to put a stitch up here, and I want to catch a little bit of my outer fabric. So this is the trouser leg, as it were, and this is the hem piece. So I'm just catching a little bit. And on a fabric that has a weave, you'll catch just a few of the threads. And can you see how doing this in this direction means that my crosses are actually crossing over each other? So now I'm going back down to my hem. And I'm creating that first cross, that first herringbone stitch. Back up to the trouser leg itself, or the outer piece of fabric, as it were. And then back down to my hem. And I keep doing that all the way along, trying not to really pull anything too tight. It's got to be tight enough that it sits firmly against each other. Each layer sits firmly against each other. But you want to make sure that nothing is pulling, nothing's becoming restricted or tight and visible on the other side. Okay, let's do this stitch here, and I think we're getting the idea of that. You see how there's still a little bit of give. By the time you press it really nicely, everything is going to sit really well. So let's do this on a piece of normal fabric. Now we've got the process underway, and we can see how it reacts to a much softer fabric. So I now have a much softer piece of fabric, piece of cotton. I've turned up my hem. I've also turned it under again to give me a firmer base for my stitching of the hem itself. It didn't matter so much when we were using the thicker felt because it was a sturdy layer on each side. So with my hem pinned in place, I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, starting at the opposite end to what I want to sew in, to the direction I want to sew in. So starting off here, I'm going to do a couple of little anchoring stitches on the turn of the hem itself. Now, like I said, this stitch can be used in ways that hold all sorts of things back. So for example, historically they used to use this over the top of the boning channel to keep it in place, and also to keep loose seam allowance in place if you're not lining something. And now I'm going to just pick up a teeny little bit of the outer layer. Remember, I don't want to be able to see this on the other side. And on this fabric, you'll see what I mean when I say don't pull anything too tight. It has to be secure, but you don't want to pull anything too tightly because you don't want anything to bunch on the opposite side, the side that you're going to see. I'm using quite a sturdy thread here as well, depending on what you're trying to achieve. If you've got a very, very fine fabric, then probably don't use this. But if you're using a medium weight to a heavier weight fabric, then using a good sturdy thread will just secure that hem even more. And you just keep repeating. Your needle position, the direction your needle is going in, should always be the same. It's always facing opposite to the way you're sewing. Here we are. A nice, secure herringbone stitch that gives the hem itself just that little bit of extra maneuverability, that little bit of ease. And on the opposite side, you should see minimal stitches. And nothing should be pulling. So when I hold this nice and flat, nothing is pulling. And then when I iron this, I give this a good press, the whole piece of fabric should appear flat. So let's return to our felt piece. For this stitch, we're going to be doing a locking stitch, and I'm going to be sewing with my needle in the same direction as the way I want to sew. So I'm going to put a little securing stitch here. And now I'm going to be putting my needle through the hem, but not through to the other side. I'm going to be working in the crease, in the recess of the hem itself. That keeps the whole stitch hidden and nice and secure. You'll see why. So I put now my needle into the main piece of fabric, and I do my first stitch. I then go back into the same stitch, take my thread, wrap it around the back of the needle, sorry, this is a little bit fiddly, and around the front of the needle. So you're doing a sort of figure 8 around the needle itself, and it enrobes that stitch. Pull that a little taut, and we have our first locking stitch. Now I go across through to here, I go back into my recess, got caught there, and I repeat the same thing. I do my first stitch, I then go back into that same stitch, making sure that everything is nice and taut, but again, don't pull anything too tightly because you don't want the fabric to warp. And I do my figure 8 around the needle, and I come through again. And now I keep repeating that process, so go back through to the hem, do a little stab stitch, as it were, a little tiny stitch to catch hold of the hem piece of fabric, and then put my needle through, my needle back through that same stitch, bring my thread, my excess thread, around the back of the needle, sorry, this is a little fiddly, around the front of the needle, so I've got my figure 8 around the needle itself, and I pull that. So this creates a very secure stitch. This is only needed when you are sure that maybe the performer in a dance piece is going to need that extra bit of reassurance in the hem of a trouser, for example. Then this would be an excellent stitch to use because it means that every single stitch is locked into place. And therefore, if a piece does get caught, it doesn't unravel the whole hem. Let's return to the softer fabric. I'm going to do the same. Put my little securing stitch at the end. This is only through the hem, remember. Don't try and secure it through both layers. You only need to do it through the hem layer itself. You don't want it coming through to the front. This is just to secure the thread itself. So I'm going to work in the recess of this hem. Move my little pin down a bit so I'm not unpinning the position of my hem. And I'm going to go through. I'm going to take a little bit. Go through in the same place, wrap my thread behind the needle, wrap it around the front of the needle, so I'm doing a figure 8, and pull that. Then go across, back through. And if you do find it a bit tricky to keep going through like this, you could actually, instead of going back through, you could do your securing stitch further up. So you're not moving between trying to sit really down into that crease. If that's a bit easier, so let's try that. We're going to do a stitch here, our thread tight there, a little teeny bit up, pull my thread around the back, go to the front. It's a little less tricky, so that might be a really good way to go forward with trying this yourself. I usually try to hide it down inside the crease, although it's a little bit more fiddly, but I'll show you why in a moment. As we get further on, you'll see why. Okay, as I bring this thread around the front of my needle and I pull it tight, you can see what I mean. The reason I do my stitching inside the crease is because otherwise I get these bars across the front, which is not the end of the world, but it just gives something else for something to get caught on. It's no different really when we're doing the herringbone stitch. You have that exposed thread, but the idea of this stitch is that you're locking everything in place, so you're trying to minimize as much possibility of something getting caught. So I always try to stitch inside my hem. So let's go back to stitching that way and we'll see the difference. So, as we can see, we've got the same effect, but with the stitches hidden inside. So this is what's happening. You see, we have our stitch through the hem to the main piece of fabric with a single stitch and a securing stitch each time. And the same thing is happening here, it's just that it's hidden. And that extra locking stitch each time means that if something does come undone, it doesn't impact the integrity of all the other stitches. And if we look through to the other side, again, we have the same thing as with our herringbone stitch. You have a tiny, tiny little dot, which with a thinner thread on a thinner fabric like this, you would not see at all. And give it a good press, and then you have a really secure hem. Now for the last stitch we're going to look at is a way of securing a fastening. You can use this stitch to secure either hooks and eyes, hooks and bars, or things like this. This is a popper, or as it's called in the States, a snap fastening. So to begin with, I am just going to do my normal securing stitches. And I'm going to make sure that my securing stitch lays at the center, so underneath this little mound, and then it doesn't get in the way of any of my stitching. So the stitch I'm going to show you is called a buttonhole stitch, generally used on buttonholes if you're making a handmade buttonhole. But it's a really good stitch, again, for its locking capabilities for putting on fastenings. So I'm going to grab my fabric and I'm going to come up through this first hole. I wrap my thread around the back of my needle, around the front to create that figure 8 stitch again, and I pull it tight. And I keep doing that. I usually do about 4, maybe 5, depending, stitches into each hole. And again, this means, especially with something like a fastener which gets a lot of strain, if something does snap, it doesn't impact the integrity of the whole fastening. And that means that maybe during a performance or something that a popper does start to rip on its threads, it can last for a bit longer until you can start fixing it in maybe the interval or at the end of the show. Now, I'm going to go to the opposite side, because then my thread is always in behind and I'm not getting any weird loops at the sides. Again, I do my figure 8. I think I did 4 stitches on that last hole, so I do the same on this one. And now I'm going to go back underneath. I'm going to go to this side over here, so my thread is behind the popper again and it's not getting any chance to catch on anything. One stitch. And then once again go through. Try not to catch your fabric as you go through, just sandwich the thread between the fabric and the back of the popper. Around here. Okay, there we have it. Now to finish it off, I'm just going to do a couple of little overcast stitches next to this last section, just to secure it off. And there we have it. Those ones have been pushed apart slightly. I could have got my stitches a bit closer in there, but that's fine. It's still acting exactly how it should. We have a nice secure popper. So I hope you enjoyed that. They are just a few of my favorite stitches, and I've got an awful lot of stitches that I could continue to show you. So if that's something that you would like to see, please let me know by putting something into the comments. And maybe if there's a stitch out there that you've heard of and you want to see being done in process, let me know and we can have a go at that as well. Before we go, I just want to let you know that I have a Patreon, and on that platform I release these videos early, but I also release a variety of different resources. And for example, I have just launched Mantle magazine. That's a monthly magazine where I will be putting together stories and reviews and recommendations for films, for exhibitions, anything related to costume and the study of costume and the enjoyment of costume. I'm also really excited that in that magazine I get the opportunity to share your work. So if you would like to be part of Mantle magazine and be featured within it, please let me know. And go over to my Patreon where you'll be able to see the different tiers and what each tier can offer you. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.